The Art of War was written more than 2,000 years ago, yet it remains one of the most misunderstood books ever created. Most people believe it is a manual for soldiers. They imagine armies, weapons, bloodshed, and battlefields. But Sun Tzu was not writing for warriors alone. He was writing for anyone who would ever face resistance, anyone who would ever face pressure, anyone who would ever face another human being with opposing intentions. Sun Tzu understood something most people never learn. Life itself is a battlefield, not because it is violent, but because it is competitive, because resources are limited, because time is limited, because attention, respect, power, and peace are limited. Every day, whether you realize it or not, you are engaged in conflict. Sometimes the conflict is external, with rivals, competitors, critics, or enemies. Other times the conflict is internal, with fear, doubt, anger, temptation, and weakness. Sun Tzu did not teach how to fight people. He taught how to win without being destroyed in the process. He taught how to move through life without unnecessary struggle, how to conserve energy, how to see clearly while others are blinded by emotion, how to remain calm while others panic, how to act decisively while others hesitate. That is why the art of war has survived for centuries, not because it teaches aggression, but because it teaches mastery. Sun Tzu believed that the highest form of intelligence is not force, but understanding, not reaction, but control, not domination, but positioning. He understood human nature deeply. He understood that most defeats happen long before the first action is taken, that people lose because they misunderstand themselves, or because they misjudge others, or because they allow emotion to replace clarity. The art of war is not about fighting harder. It is about thinking better. It is about knowing when to move and when to remain still, when to speak and when to remain silent, when to advance and when to withdraw. It is about seeing reality as it is, not as you wish it to be. And above all, it is about self-mastery, because before you can control any situation, you must first control yourself. Sun Tzu knew that a man who cannot govern his own mind will never govern his circumstances, that a person who is ruled by anger, pride, fear, or impatience will always be predictable, and predictability is weakness. This is why his lessons apply far beyond war. They apply to leadership, to relationships, to business, to ambition, to discipline, to survival. They apply to life. These are the 21 principles of the art of war, not as weapons for violence, but as tools for clarity, strength, and quiet dominance. And the first principle is the foundation of them all. Know yourself and know your enemy. And you need not fear the outcome of 100 battles. This single idea carries more power than most people realize. To know yourself is not a motivational slogan. It is not positive thinking. It is not confidence without evidence. Knowing yourself means understanding your true nature. It means seeing your strengths without exaggeration, and seeing your weaknesses without denial. Most people avoid this. They inflate their abilities to protect their ego, or they ignore their flaws because facing them is uncomfortable. But self-deception is the fastest path to defeat. If you do not know where you are weak, you will place yourself in situations that expose those weaknesses. If you do not know where you are strong, you will fail to leverage your advantages. To know yourself is to understand your temperament, your emotional triggers, your limits under pressure, your habits when things become difficult. It is knowing whether you act impulsively or cautiously, whether you become reckless when confident or frozen when uncertain. It is understanding how you behave when you are tired, when you are hungry, when you are praised, when you are insulted. Most people live their entire lives without this awareness. They react automatically. They repeat the same mistakes. They blame circumstances, people, or fate. Sun Tzu would say they are already defeated, because a man who does not understand himself cannot adapt. And adaptation is everything. Knowing yourself also means understanding your values. What truly matters to you, what you are willing to sacrifice, what you refuse to compromise. Without this clarity, you can be manipulated, pulled into battles that drain you, distracted by conflicts that do not serve your purpose. A person without self-knowledge fights every battle. A wise person chooses only the battles that matter. But knowing yourself alone is not enough. You must also know your enemy. And here, enemy does not always mean a person. Sometimes the enemy is a system. Sometimes it is an environment. Sometimes it is a pattern of behavior. Sometimes it is fear disguised as caution. Sometimes it is comfort disguised as safety. To know your enemy is to observe without emotion. It is to understand motivations rather than appearances, intentions rather than words. People often show you who they want you to see, rarely who they truly are. Sun Tzu teaches that understanding others requires patience, listening more than speaking, watching more than acting. When you understand what drives someone, you understand how they will move. Fear makes people defensive. Pride makes people reckless. Greed makes people impatient. Insecurity makes people loud. When you recognize these patterns, you stop being surprised. And surprise is what destroys unprepared minds. Knowing your enemy also means understanding their strengths. Underestimating others is arrogance, and arrogance blinds judgment. You do not win by assuming others are weak. You win by respecting their capabilities and preparing accordingly. At the same time, you must recognize their weaknesses. Everyone has them. Some people are controlled by emotion, some by validation, some by fear of loss, some by the need to be right. When you understand this, you do not need force. You need positioning. Sun Tzu believed that the person who knows both sides of the equation operates with calm certainty. They do not rush. They do not panic. They do not overreact. They act with precision, because no situation is truly dangerous when both yourself and the opposition are understood. Ignorance creates fear. Knowledge creates control. That is why this principle comes first. Without self-knowledge, you cannot adjust. Without understanding others, you cannot anticipate. Master both, and conflict loses its power over you. The second principle flows naturally from the first. The supreme art of war is to subdue the enemy without fighting. This is where most people misunderstand Sun Tzu. They assume this means manipulation or cowardice. It does not. It means intelligence. It means understanding that every conflict has a cost: energy, time, reputation, relationships, peace of mind. Fighting should never be the first option, because even when you win through force, you lose something in the process. Sun Tzu believed that true mastery is achieving your objective without destruction, without chaos, without escalation. The highest victory is the one that leaves you intact. This principle applies everywhere: in arguments, in negotiations, in leadership, in relationships. Most people escalate unnecessarily. They argue to satisfy ego. They confront to release emotion. They attack because they feel threatened. And in doing so, they expose themselves. They waste energy. They create enemies. They damage trust. A wise person seeks outcomes, not domination. Subduing without fighting means resolving conflict before it explodes. It means using understanding, timing, and strategy instead of brute force. Sometimes this means persuasion. Sometimes it means silence. Sometimes it means withdrawing and allowing the other side to defeat themselves. Sun Tzu understood that people often collapse under their own weight. When you stop pushing against them, resistance feeds resistance. Calm disarms aggression. When you do not react emotionally, you force the other person to confront themselves. This is uncomfortable for them, and discomfort creates mistakes. Subduing without fighting also means controlling circumstances. If you shape the environment correctly, conflict becomes unnecessary. If expectations are managed, if incentives are aligned, if pressure is applied subtly, outcomes can be achieved without confrontation. Think of the leader who inspires loyalty rather than demands obedience. Think of the negotiator who frames choices so agreement feels natural. Think of the person who walks away at the right moment, leaving the other party uncertain and off balance. These are victories without violence. Sun Tzu would say that force is a sign of failure, because if you must fight openly, it means strategy has already failed. True power operates quietly. It does not announce itself. It does not seek recognition. It does not need validation. It moves beneath the surface. When you learn to subdue without fighting, you conserve strength. You remain flexible. You avoid unnecessary scars. And perhaps most importantly, you retain control over yourself. Because the moment you lose emotional control, you hand power to the situation. Sun Tzu's wisdom is not about becoming ruthless. It is about becoming precise, about acting only when action serves your purpose, about understanding that the calm mind is the most dangerous weapon of all. These first two principles form the foundation. Know yourself, know others. Seek victory without destruction. Everything else builds upon this. And as you move deeper into these teachings, You will begin to see something clearly. The people who appear most powerful are rarely the ones who fight the most. They are the ones who rarely need to fight at all. The third principle of the art of war is often quoted, but rarely understood. Opportunities multiply as they are seized. Most people wait. They wait for clarity. They wait for confidence. They wait for permission. They wait until the moment feels safe. Sun Tzu understood that waiting is not neutral. Waiting is a decision. And most of the time, it is a decision that hands control to someone else. Opportunities do not grow through hesitation. They grow through movement. Action creates information. Action reveals resistance. Action exposes weaknesses and strengths that cannot be discovered through thought alone. A person who acts gains feedback. A person who waits gains excuses. Sun Tzu did not advocate reckless behavior. He did not suggest rushing blindly into danger. He taught prepared action, the kind of action that is grounded in observation, guided by understanding, and executed without delay. When you seize an opportunity, you do more than gain a single advantage. You change your position. You gain momentum. Momentum is a force that compounds. One small step forward often reveals the next step. One decision opens paths that were previously invisible. One risk taken wisely creates leverage. But hesitation closes doors. Opportunities are time-sensitive. They decay when ignored. They lose value when postponed. They are taken by others when you hesitate. Sun Tzu observed that boldness, when paired with awareness, creates advantage. Those who move first often shape the terrain. They define the rules. They force others to respond. Those who move last are forced to adapt. This principle applies to every area of life. In leadership, delayed decisions create confusion. In relationships, missed moments create distance. In ambition, hesitation creates regret. People often say they are waiting for the right time. But the right time is rarely announced. It reveals itself only to those who are already moving. Sun Tzu would say that opportunity favors the prepared mind. The person who knows themselves, who understands their environment, and who acts without unnecessary delay, multiplies their chances of success. Because every action creates new possibilities, and every possibility, when seized, creates more. The fourth principle cuts deeper. All warfare is based on deception. This makes many people uncomfortable. They associate deception with dishonesty or immorality. But Sun Tzu was not speaking about lying for cruelty. He was speaking about control of information. Life is not fair because information is not equally distributed. Those who reveal everything they know, everything they plan, everything they feel, place themselves at a disadvantage. Transparency without discernment is not virtue. It is vulnerability. Sun Tzu understood that appearances shape reactions. People respond not to reality, but to their perception of reality. If you allow others to see everything clearly, you surrender the advantage of mystery. Deception in this context does not mean fabricating lies. It means managing what is visible. It means choosing what to reveal and what to conceal. In negotiations, revealing your urgency weakens your position. In conflict, revealing your anger gives leverage to the other side. In ambition, revealing your plans invites interference. Sun Tzu taught that showing strength when you are weak can deter attack, and appearing weak when you are strong can invite mistakes from others. This is not manipulation. It is strategy. Most people telegraph their intentions. They speak too much. They explain themselves unnecessarily. They announce goals before they are secured. In doing so, they become predictable. Predictability is exploitable. When others know your next move, they prepare for it. When they believe they understand you, they stop questioning. Sun Tzu advised maintaining ambiguity, not to confuse for ego, but to protect position. When people cannot read you clearly, they hesitate. Hesitation creates opportunity. Silence, when used wisely, forces others to fill the gaps with assumptions. And assumptions are rarely accurate. Deception also applies inward. You must not deceive yourself. Many people convince themselves they are prepared, when they are not. They hide from reality by creating comforting narratives. Sun Tzu would say this is the most dangerous deception of all, because self-deception guarantees failure. True strategy requires brutal honesty with oneself and careful presentation to the outside world. The fifth principle is one of the most powerful. In the midst of chaos, there is also opportunity. Chaos frightens most people. Uncertainty creates anxiety. Disruption creates fear. Instability creates paralysis. Sun Tzu saw something different. He saw possibility. Chaos breaks patterns. It dismantles routines. It disrupts hierarchies. It exposes weaknesses that remain hidden during calm periods. When systems are stable, those in power are protected. When chaos erupts, positions shift. Those who rely on structure collapse. Those who rely on adaptability rise. Sun Tzu believed that calm minds dominate chaotic environments. Because chaos overwhelms the emotional, fear clouds judgment. Panic leads to impulsive decisions. Confusion creates mistakes. But the disciplined mind sees clearly. It slows down internally, even when the world speeds up. In moments of chaos, most people react. They follow the crowd. They imitate others. They grasp for certainty. This is when the strategic individual separates themselves. They observe. They ask different questions. They look for gaps. Chaos creates openings because it forces movement. People abandon positions they once defended. They make concessions they once refused. They reveal priorities under pressure. Sun Tzu taught that chaos is not to be feared. It is to be used, not through exploitation of suffering, but through awareness of shifting dynamics. Those who remain composed can reposition themselves quickly. They adapt while others cling to what no longer works. In personal life, chaos reveals character. It shows who can remain steady under pressure, who can think clearly when plans collapse, who can act decisively without losing control. In business, chaos creates innovation. In leadership, chaos reveals competence. In life, chaos tests discipline. Sun Tzu would say that chaos is a forge. It either weakens you or sharpens you. The difference lies in preparation and mindset. Those who panic become victims of circumstance. Those who remain calm become architects of outcome. These principles build upon each other. Action creates opportunity. Control of information preserves advantage. Calm within, chaos creates openings. This is how influence is built, not through force, not through noise, but through clarity, restraint, and timing. And as you move forward, the lessons become sharper, because Sun Tzu now turns to one of the hardest skills of all: discernment, knowing when to engage and when to walk away. The sixth principle of the art of war addresses a skill that separates the wise from the exhausted. He will win who knows when to fight and when not to fight. Most people believe strength is proven by confrontation. They feel the need to respond to every challenge, to defend every insult, to correct every misunderstanding. Sun Tzu would call this immaturity. Strength is not measured by how often you engage, but by how selectively you do so. Every conflict has a cost, not only in energy and time, but in focus, emotional balance, and long-term position. When you fight every battle, you arrive at the important ones already weakened. Sun Tzu understood that restraint is a form of power. The ability to walk away from a provocation is not weakness. It is control. Those who cannot resist reacting are easily manipulated. They are drawn into conflicts that serve someone else's agenda. They fight battles that distract them from their true objectives. Knowing when not to fight requires clarity of purpose. You must know what truly matters. If a conflict does not move you closer to your goal, it is a liability. This principle applies deeply to modern life. Arguments that drain peace, competitions that waste energy, proving yourself to people whose opinion has no impact on your future. Sun Tzu would advise withdrawal not out of fear, but out of intelligence. Retreat is not defeat when it preserves strength for a decisive moment. The skilled individual engages only when conditions are favorable. They wait for timing, leverage, and position. And when they do engage, it is with full commitment. This is the paradox of restraint. By fighting less, you win more. The seventh principle builds on this selectivity. Appear at points which the enemy must hasten to defend. March swiftly to places where you are not expected. This is the principle of surprise. Sun Tzu believed predictability was one of the greatest weaknesses. When your actions follow obvious patterns, others prepare. They anticipate. They reinforce. They resist. But when your movement is unexpected, resistance collapses. Surprise does not require speed alone. It requires misdirection. It requires flexibility. It requires the courage to move where others are unwilling or unable to follow. Sun Tzu taught that success often lies where competition is weakest. Most people chase crowded paths. They compete where everyone else competes. They follow trends. They imitate strategies. In doing so, they place themselves in constant resistance. The wise individual looks elsewhere. They identify neglected spaces, undervalued opportunities, paths that appear uncomfortable or unconventional. By the time others notice, position has already been secured. Surprise also operates on a psychological level. When you behave differently than expected, you disrupt assumptions. When you respond calmly to provocation, others become uncertain. When you act decisively where hesitation was expected, you gain momentum. Uncertainty destabilizes opponents. It forces them into reaction. Sun Tzu understood that reaction is always weaker than initiation. Those who control the direction of movement control the outcome. This principle encourages adaptability. You must not become attached to a single plan. Rigidity makes you vulnerable. Flexibility keeps you unpredictable. Sun Tzu would say that water flows where resistance is least. So should strategy. The eighth principle introduces a quieter, deeper warning. Even the finest sword plunged into salt water will eventually rust. Neglect destroys strength. This principle is about maintenance, about discipline, about understanding that nothing remains sharp without care. Most people focus intensely on building strength, but little on preserving it. They train hard, then stop. They succeed, then relax. They gain momentum, then assume it will last. Sun Tzu knew better. Strength decays without attention. Skills fade when unused. Relationships weaken when neglected. Discipline erodes when consistency is lost. The decline is gradual, so gradual that most people do not notice it until damage is done. This is why maintenance requires humility. You must accept that progress is not permanent, without effort. You must respect the fragility of advantage. Sun Tzu believed that vigilance was a form of respect. Respect for your own potential. Respect for the difficulty of achievement. The disciplined individual does not stop. Once success is visible, they continue to refine. They protect what they have built. They understand that mastery is not a destination, but a practice. This principle applies deeply to character. A calm mind must be maintained. A strong body must be maintained. A focused purpose must be maintained. Neglect leads to rust. Rust leads to failure. Sun Tzu's lesson is clear. Winning once is not enough. Sustaining success requires constant care. These three principles shape endurance. Choosing battles preserves strength. Surprise creates advantage. Discipline preserves power. Together they form the mindset of longevity. Not loud, not reactive, not careless, but deliberate, flexible, and consistent. As these teachings continue, Sun Tzu turns to one of the most dangerous traps of all: attachment to past victories. The ninth principle of the art of war warns against one of the most subtle forms of failure. Do not repeat the tactics which have gained you one victory, but let your methods be regulated by the infinite variety of circumstances. Success can be dangerous. When something works, people cling to it. They repeat it. They rely on it. They build identity around it. Sun Tzu understood that this attachment creates rigidity, and rigidity invites defeat. Life does not reward consistency of method. It rewards consistency of awareness. What works in one situation may fail completely in another. Conditions change. People adapt. Environments evolve. Those who succeed once often fail later because they assume the world will remain the same. Sun Tzu taught adaptability as a core virtue. Adaptability requires humility. It requires admitting that past success does not guarantee future victory. It requires releasing ego. The ego wants repetition. It wants recognition. It wants certainty. But strategy demands flexibility. A skilled individual studies the present moment. They do not force old solutions onto new problems. They read context. They sense momentum. They adjust without attachment. This does not mean abandoning principles. It means evolving execution. Your values remain steady. Your methods remain fluid. Those who refuse to adapt become predictable. Predictability creates vulnerability. Sun Tzu would say that stagnation is simply defeat delayed. The 10th principle shifts focus from tactics to character. A leader leads by example, not by force. Authority imposed through fear is fragile. It collapses the moment pressure is removed. Sun Tzu understood that influence is more powerful than control. People follow behavior more than commands. They mirror discipline. They imitate calm. They respect consistency. A leader who relies on force reveals weakness, because force is needed only when respect is absent. True leadership operates quietly. It inspires rather than intimidates. It sets standards rather than enforces rules. Sun Tzu believed that leadership begins with self-mastery. A leader who cannot control their emotions cannot stabilize others. A leader who lacks discipline cannot demand it. A leader who reacts impulsively creates uncertainty. Example is the strongest form of instruction. People learn what you tolerate. They follow what you embody. Sun Tzu would say that a leader's presence should reduce chaos, not increase it. In modern life, this applies everywhere. In families, in teams, in communities. Those who remain composed under pressure become anchors. Those who act with integrity create trust. Leadership is not volume. It is consistency. The 11th principle introduces psychological precision. Engage people with what they expect. It is what they are able to discern and confirms their projections. This principle is about perception. Sun Tzu understood that people see the world through their assumptions. They filter reality to confirm what they already believe. Rather than fighting this, the skilled strategist uses it. When you behave in expected ways, people relax. They stop analyzing. They lower their guard. Predictability, when chosen deliberately, becomes camouflage. Sun Tzu taught that appearing ordinary can conceal extraordinary intent. When others believe they understand you, they stop paying attention. This creates space. Space to observe. Space to prepare. Space to act decisively. The extraordinary moment arrives when expectations collapse, when others realize too late that they misjudged the situation. This principle is not about deception for harm. It is about efficiency. Why fight resistance when you can bypass it? Why confront directly when you can move unseen? Sun Tzu believed that mastery lies in controlling perception. Those who control perception control reaction. Those who control reaction control outcome. This requires patience. It requires restraint. It requires comfort with being underestimated. Most people crave recognition. They want to be seen, to be acknowledged, to be validated. Sun Tzu would say this craving is exploitable. The person who does not need recognition moves freely. They are not bound by expectations. They are not driven by ego. They act when the moment is right, not when applause is guaranteed. These three principles refine sophistication, adapt to circumstance, lead through example, move beneath perception. Together they elevate strategy, from action to influence, from force to finesse. And as Sun Tzu continues, he turns to something many people misunderstand: patience. The 12th principle of the art of war speaks directly to restraint. Ponder and deliberate before you make a move. In a world that rewards speed and noise, patience is misunderstood. Many confuse patience with hesitation. Sun Tzu made a clear distinction. Hesitation is indecision born from fear. Deliberation is preparation born from clarity. The wise individual does not rush. They observe. They measure. They consider consequences. Every action creates ripples. Some are visible immediately. Others emerge slowly, quietly, and irreversibly. Sun Tzu believed that thought precedes victory. Quick action without understanding creates temporary movement, not progress. The person who acts without reflection is driven by impulse. Impulse feels powerful in the moment, but it rarely leads to control. Deliberation sharpens judgment. It allows you to identify risks before they become crises. It helps you recognize which battles matter and which can be avoided. Sun Tzu did not advocate endless analysis. He warned against paralysis. Deliberation is not delay for its own sake. It is focused preparation. The moment clarity is achieved, action must follow decisively. The balance between patience and speed is where mastery lives. The 13th principle expands the idea of control. Those skilled in war bring the enemy to the field of battle and are not brought there by him. This is the principle of environment. Sun Tzu understood that circumstances shape outcomes. Whoever controls the setting controls the dynamics. Most people allow life to dictate terms. They react to situations rather than shaping them. They accept conditions they did not choose and then struggle within them. Sun Tzu taught that power begins by choosing where and how engagement occurs. In battle, terrain determines advantage. In life, context does the same. Meetings, conversations, timing, location, all influence outcome. When you allow others to dictate terms, you surrender leverage. When you choose the setting, you shape the flow. This principle requires foresight. You must think ahead. Where will this path lead? What conditions will this decision create? The strategic individual positions themselves where strengths are amplified and weaknesses are minimized. They avoid arenas where they are disadvantaged. This is not avoidance, it is intelligence. Sun Tzu would say that choosing the battlefield is half the victory. The 14th principle introduces an invisible weapon. The whole secret lies in confusing the enemy, so that he cannot fathom your real intent. Mystery is power. When people cannot predict you, they become cautious. Caution slows movement. Slowed movement creates openings. Sun Tzu did not mean chaos for its own sake. He meant deliberate ambiguity. Revealing too much creates clarity. Clarity creates resistance. Uncertainty forces others to hesitate. Hesitation disrupts plans. The person who maintains mystery controls tempo. They decide when information is released. They decide when intentions become visible. This requires discipline. Silence is difficult. Most people feel compelled to explain themselves. They seek reassurance. They seek approval. Sun Tzu understood that explanation often weakens position. When you explain, you invite judgment. When you remain silent, others must interpret. Interpretation rarely favors them. Mystery also protects you. When your intentions are unclear, others cannot sabotage them. When your plans are concealed, they cannot be attacked. This principle does not promote isolation. It promotes selectivity. Not everyone deserves access to your thoughts. Not everyone benefits from knowing your direction. Sun Tzu believed that restraint in speech creates freedom in action. These principles refine inner control. Deliberate before acting. Choose the environment. Protect intention through mystery. Together they create strategic depth. And as Sun Tzu continues, he turns to cost. Because every move, no matter how clever, demands payment. The 15th principle of the art of war is one of responsibility. He who wishes to fight must first count the cost. Every decision carries weight. Nothing of value is free. Sun Tzu understood that conflict extracts payment long before results are known. Most people rush into action, focused only on the desired outcome. They ignore the hidden expenses: time, energy, reputation, relationships, peace of mind. The cost of conflict is not always visible at first. Sometimes it appears later, quietly, in the form of exhaustion or regret. Sun Tzu taught that wisdom lies in seeing the full price in advance. This does not mean avoiding challenge. It means choosing it deliberately. If the cost outweighs the benefit, the battle is already lost. The strategic individual evaluates not only whether they can win, but whether winning is worth it. Many victories damage the victor. Sun Tzu would say these are failures, disguised as success. Counting the cost also prevents impulsive escalation. When emotions rise, clarity falls. Anger narrows vision. Pride blinds judgment. Deliberation restores balance. By counting the cost, you regain control over impulse. You choose action instead of being dragged into reaction. The 16th principle deepens psychological awareness. When strong, appear weak. When weak, appear strong. This is the art of perception. Sun Tzu understood that people act based on what they believe they see. Appearances shape behavior. Those who appear powerful attract challenge. Those who appear vulnerable invite aggression. The skilled strategist controls these signals. Feigning weakness can create overconfidence in others. Overconfidence leads to mistakes. Mistakes create opportunity. Likewise, projecting strength can deter unnecessary conflict. This does not mean arrogance. It means presence. Calm confidence unsettles aggression. Uncertainty invites probing. Sun Tzu taught that power is not always shown. Sometimes it is concealed until the decisive moment. This principle also applies inward. Do not overestimate yourself. False confidence leads to recklessness. True strength is quiet. It does not announce itself. It waits. The 17th principle addresses commitment. Victory is reserved for those who are willing to pay its price. Great outcomes require sacrifice. Time must be invested. Discomfort must be endured. Focus must be sustained. Sun Tzu rejected half measures. He believed that indecision wastes more energy than commitment. If you choose to engage, you must do so fully. Partial effort creates prolonged struggle. Prolonged struggle drains resources. Victory demands alignment. Mind, action, and purpose must move together. This principle also warns against desire without discipline. Many people want success, but refuse the cost. They want results without sacrifice. Sun Tzu would say this is illusion. Achievement requires endurance. Endurance requires acceptance of difficulty. Those who commit fully develop resilience. Those who hesitate remain trapped between action and fear. These principles refine maturity, count the cost, control perception, commit fully. Together they define responsibility and action. And as Sun Tzu continues, he turns to speed, because timing is often the difference between survival and loss. The 18th principle of the art of war is direct and unforgiving. If quick, I survive. If not quick, I am lost. Sun Tzu understood the cruelty of timing. Opportunities appear briefly. They do not wait for comfort. They do not announce themselves clearly. Hesitation turns possibility into loss. Speed in Sun Tzu's teaching is not recklessness. It is readiness. The disciplined individual prepares in advance, so action can be immediate when the moment arrives. Speed is the reward of preparation. Those who must think in the moment are already late. Sun Tzu believed that decisiveness creates momentum. Momentum overwhelms resistance. When you act swiftly and purposefully, others are forced into reaction. Reaction is slower than initiation. This principle applies to crisis. When situations collapse, those who freeze are consumed. Those who act, even imperfectly, retain agency. Speed preserves control, but speed must be intelligent. Movement without direction creates chaos. Sun Tzu valued swift execution. After deliberate planning, the 19th principle reveals restraint and victory. Build your opponent a golden bridge to retreat across. This is mercy as strategy. Forcing others into humiliation creates lasting enemies. Sun Tzu understood that cornered opponents become dangerous. When people have no path of retreat, they fight desperately. Desperation ignores cost. By offering dignity in defeat, you prevent future conflict. This principle reflects long-term thinking. Victory is not the end of strategy. What follows matters. Relationships endure. Reputations remain. Consequences linger. Sun Tzu believed true strength did not require cruelty. It required foresight. Mercy preserves stability. It allows others to withdraw without seeking revenge. This does not mean weakness. It means control. The 20th principle addresses energy. Energy may be likened to the bending of a crossbow, decision to the releasing of a trigger. Preparation builds tension. Action releases it. Sun Tzu emphasized alignment. Effort without decision is wasted potential. Decision without preparation is failure. Power is not constant. It must be stored, then released at the correct moment. This principle teaches patience. Do not release energy prematurely. Wait until timing, position, and clarity align. When the moment arrives, act without hesitation. Indecision dissipates power. Decisive action concentrates it. Sun Tzu believed that execution transforms intention into reality. Ideas remain inert until acted upon. These principles sharpen timing. Be ready to move. Act swiftly. Allow dignity in defeat. Release power deliberately. Together they define mastery of momentum. And now Sun Tzu reaches his final lesson. The ultimate form of control. The final principle of the art of war is the culmination of all that came before. The clever combatant imposes his will on the enemy, but does not allow the enemy's will to be imposed on him. This is the highest form of mastery. It is not domination through force. It is not control through fear. It is sovereignty of mind. Sun Tzu understood that the greatest battles are not fought externally. They are fought internally. Most people surrender control long before they realize it. They allow circumstances to dictate their emotions. They allow other people's behavior to shape their reactions. They allow pressure to determine their decisions. In doing so, they lose authority over their own lives. To impose your will does not mean bending others violently. It means refusing to be bent. It means acting from intention, rather than reaction. It means choosing your direction, even when conditions are unfavorable. Sun Tzu believed that the person who remains internally steady cannot be defeated. They may be delayed, They may be challenged, they may be opposed, but they are not controlled. Control is surrendered the moment you react emotionally. Anger hands power to its cause. Fear hands power to uncertainty. Ego hands power to insult. The disciplined mind observes without submission. It acknowledges reality, without allowing reality to dictate identity. This is what Sun Tzu meant by imposing will. Your purpose does not change, because circumstances shift. Your values do not collapse, because pressure increases. Your direction remains intact, even when resistance appears. This is inner dominance, and inner dominance shapes outer outcome. When you do not allow others to control your emotions, they lose leverage. When you do not allow chaos to control your thinking, you gain clarity. When you do not allow fear to control your movement, you regain freedom. Sun Tzu understood that power is retained by those who remain self-directed. They choose when to engage. They choose when to withdraw. They choose when to speak. And when silence is more effective, they are not pulled into conflicts unnecessarily. They do not chase validation. They do not fight battles that do not serve their mission. They are not governed by impulse. This is what separates the master from the reactive. The art of war, when understood correctly, is not about defeating others. It is about defeating the forces that seek to control you. Ignorance, emotion, pride, fear, impatience. These are the real enemies. When you conquer them, external conflicts lose their power. Sun Tzu's wisdom is timeless, because human nature has not changed. People still act from fear. They still chase status. They still react impulsively. They still confuse noise with strength. The disciplined individual rises above this. They move deliberately. They act with precision. They conserve energy. They strike only when necessary. They understand themselves. They understand others. They respect cost. They value timing. They preserve dignity. They do not seek chaos, but they are not afraid of it. They do not seek conflict, but they are prepared for it. They do not need to announce power. Their calm is power. This is the final lesson. Master yourself, and no external force can truly defeat you. Control your mind, and your circumstances will follow. Move through life with clarity instead of aggression, with discipline instead of impulse, with strategy instead of reaction. This is the art of war, not a guide to violence, but a guide to mastery. And mastery, once achieved, cannot be taken from you.